Hey guys, Jonathan here, and in this video I'll be going over how I think the real estate market could play out in the Greater Toronto Area in 2024. Quick intro, I'm a Toronto area real estate agent based in Etobicoke. Click subscribe if you like real estate content. Let's start by summarizing where we are now that 2023 is over. Total residential sales in the city of Toronto landed slightly above 24,000 at 24,373 sales for the year of 2023. That's between both houses and condos. This is the lowest number of annual sales in over 25 years. Literally, the last time sales were under 24,000 in Toronto was 1998, when there were a heck of a lot fewer condos. Now, the almost 24-year average annual sales transactions between the year 2000 and 2023 is about 34,500. So we're well below the average number of annual sales. But the years 2018 and 2019, which in my mind were probably the most balanced years in recent memory. And I'm saying that as an active agent. There was no buyer mania and there was low buyer fear. The number of sales in those years were 30,000 in 2018 and 32,200 in 2019. So really a balanced year would be somewhere in the low 30,000 transactions. I've heard some analysts state that during the busy periods of the pandemic between fall 2020 and spring 2022, sales transactions were borrowed from future years, which I think you can make an argument for, at least for what the mass population's moving needs were, and the fact that there was just so many investors out there scooping up second, third, fourth properties. But now that we're about 1.5 years into high interest rates, while rock bottom interest rates lasted about 2 years, it's appearing those transactions have been paid back. The 4-year average number of transactions between 2020 and 2023 in the 416 in the city of Toronto is now sitting at 32,000, which includes the periods pre-pandemic, the pandemic, and of course, where we are today. So that's how we ended 2023. The sentiment of sellers at the end of the year, if I were to summarize in a few words, it would be, this is my price, take it or leave it. So unless the sellers had to sell because they were financially distressed, or as is sometimes the case with the power of sale, sellers in Toronto for the most part were holding out for their price. In December, the Bank of Canada and the US Federal Reserve Bank, aka the Fed, chose not to raise rates again. No surprises there. Economically, things seem to have slowed sufficiently to make that call. But the Fed made a very strong and very explicit public announcement stating that 2024 will see a minimum of 3 rate cuts, which means rates would drop a minimum of 0.75%. If you don't know, whatever the Fed in the US does, the Bank of Canada typically follows to continue to stay competitive. But what's noteworthy down south is 2024 is an election year, which will occur in the fall, and the Fed will aim to avoid doing those rate cuts right before or during the election, as it would appear as influencing or tampering by the current administration. They may be targeting mid-2024 between May and August. Now, if the Bank of Canada mirrors those moves, that's good news for variable rate holders, anyone renewing a mortgage, and some home buyers. But hold your horses, because Tiff Macklem continues to be extremely hawkish in his commentary and has stated that there are no rate drops planned anytime soon, with the Bank of Canada even leaving the door open to additional rate hikes. In using this verbiage, the Bank of Canada is trying to avoid the pivot paradox, when consumers start spending in advance of an expected rate drop, having our economy overperform at a time when it shouldn't. But the US economy has such strong gravitational pull and influence on our own that it's hard to ignore their dovish optimism with all this coverage of lowering rates. I believe that some of this optimism will leach into our real estate market for 2024.
Choice. You can have the boat or the mystery box.
What, are you crazy? We'll take the boat.
No, not so fast, Lois. A boat's a boat, but the mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat. You know how much we've wanted one of those.
Markets rise and go high on optimism and potential, and shrink and go low on fear. In early January, I believe we're feeling modestly optimistic, but that doesn't mean we won't experience fear and caution at any time in 2024. So high level, I expect 2024 overall to be a better performing year than 2023, with more sales and likely a higher average sale price. Nothing crazy, but in Toronto, maybe a 2 to 3% rise in average sale prices. And this rise will especially be true if interest rates drop even slightly throughout the year. Right now, you can get a variable rate mortgage around 6% in the low 6s, and a 50 basis point or 0.5% reduction in interest rate would increase a buyer's budget by 4.5%, based off today's rates. And a 1% drop in rates would increase the top end of a budget by 9.25%. So anyone looking to buy at the max of their budget would have access to more capital. If rates drop down to 4%, which I think is probably where they'll eventually settle in the years to come, it would increase a buyer's budget by around 20%. So if rates drop and inventory remains constrained and the number of active buyers increases, at least in Toronto and for much of the GTA, it's unreasonable to expect that prices stay flat. However, the understanding that the general public has when they hear that markets are either rising or shrinking is that it's affecting all cities, all neighborhoods, and all price points equally, which is rarely the case. For example, I believe Toronto homes will almost always perform decent to well, even in tough times. However, more than a 1.5 hour commute outside of the city, like in the Niagara or Simcoe regions, will be a different story. So quick disclaimer before I get into this, my predictions are really just food for thought. Some of it is based on my own experiences, while others are sort of just extrapolations on extrapolations. So take it as entertainment value. You're just watching some guy on YouTube. My prediction is the markets in the outer edges of the GTA are going to continue to be slow, with the exception of the starter price points. So any freeholds under or around 600,000 is probably still going to continue to move well, and condos under 400,000 will also move. Reason being is these price points hardly exist anymore in Southern Ontario, and you can't really build at a price that matches. And if you don't believe me, you can do a quick search on Realtor.ca or House Sigma in the GTA for a decent house under 600,000 or a decent condo under 400,000. In the outer GTA, higher price points and luxury will likely continue to struggle. So that's most homes over about $1.2 million, I'd say. And there's higher potential for outer GTA cities and neighborhoods to be more affected by mortgage renewals, especially for homes over 1.2 million, predominantly due to the lower average household incomes compared to Toronto. There will continue to be fewer investors in 2024. For the most part, investors have fallen off the map over the last year and a half, with many divesting or just trying to hold onto what they have. There were a lot of big bets made by investors between 2020 and 2022. And even if there is some optimism, I think many investors have seen the downside and will continue to act cautiously throughout this year. In the city of Toronto and the cities directly surrounding it, so Vaughan, Mississauga, Markham, and to some extent Pickering, I think we're going to see markets pick up for most price points, but it will reflect a slightly more balanced market, more so than the buyer's market we experienced this past fall. Toronto area condos, I don't think they'll continue to tank, but I don't expect the condo market to rebound or be as robust as a freehold market for a couple of reasons. One, Gen Z, population-wise, appears to be a smaller generation than the millennials before them, so the demand for a first-time buyer condo will just be a bit lower. And two, I believe that the stigma for living at home for longer no longer exists like it did for my generation as a millennial, so there's less urgency to move or get on that property ladder. In the Toronto area, freehold houses under 1.3 million will be the most competitive price point. This is the price range that's attracting new immigrants that have brought over every dollar to start their lives here. And this is also the budget of most upsizers or first-time buyers who have started families in cramped quarters in the last few years. A $1.3 million purchase price with today's rates also lines up with a household income of $250,000 and a 20% down payment, or a household income of $200,000 and a 35% down payment, which sounds like a lot, but is possible if you built up a fair amount of equity in a condo or have made some great gains in your TFSA or first-time homebuyer savings account. Still, we're looking at mainly double income households. This threshold price range has held for the last couple years, and in my discussions with other realtors, the range seems to apply for much of the GTA. I expect the higher price points north of 2 million to 2.5 million or so to continue to see longer days on market, but I don't expect we'll see much of a drop in value for those homes either. With that said, there will probably be some slow periods this year. I'm expecting a slower spring start, similar to last year, before things take off in March, and I think that things will start to roll in summer once the US makes their first rate cut. Even if the Bank of Canada doesn't start dropping rates at that point, I think that Toronto buyers will start anticipating it. However, I feel like that our central bank will probably hold off on dropping rates for some months following the US, simply to keep some of that pent-up demand at bay. And if that's the case, the fall market could slow down rather than gain momentum, especially as we near the US election. The economy will be a big talking point in the US, and Canadians will be glued to the outcome of the election the week or two before it happens. This will be a period when many buyers will exercise caution and the market will appear to be down, but if the first rate drop from the Bank of Canada comes close to the end of the year. The timing will also coincide with the Christmas season, and dependent on the outcome of the election and the sequence of the rate drops, we may see the market finish the year with a strong showing of buyers. So I think this spring, similar to the groundhog checking their shadow, many home buyers in the Toronto area will poke their head out and start to look around to see if buying works for them, and a good number are going to feel comfortable and optimistic about moving forward with a move. By the end of 2024, I think we'll overall perform better than we did in 2023, but still not land completely in balanced market territory. My guess is we'll probably finish the year around 27,000 to 28,000 transactions in the city of Toronto. So that's it for me. Again, I'm Jonathan Lee, a Toronto area real estate agent based in Etobicoke. If you want to have a chat, you can schedule a call with me through the Calendly link below in the description. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.